March 17, 1943, 2:47 a.m. North Atlantic, 340 miles west of Ireland. Lieutenant Peter Harwick pressed his face against the cold metal of the ASDIC console, his hands trembling, not from the temperature, but from what he was hearing. Through his headphones came a sound that shouldn't exist, a low, resonant hum at 287 cycles per second, unmistakably metallic, unmistakably German. U-boat U-456 was 800 yards below them, running silent, thinking themselves invisible. They were wrong. Before we continue with Peter Harwick's incredible story, we need your help to keep these forgotten heroes alive. If you're already hooked by what you're hearing, hit that like button right now. It tells YouTube to share this with more people who care about real history. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story of courage and innovation from World War II. And here's something we love. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Your country, your city. We have viewers from Buenos Aires to Berlin, from Manila to Montreal. Are you a veteran? Did your grandfather serve? Do you have a connection to this war? We want to hear from you. Now back to the North Atlantic, March 17, 1943, where Peter Harwick was about to change naval warfare forever. Harwick's captain stood behind him, watching the young operator's shoulders tighten. "You're certain?" Commander Mills asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The entire bridge had gone silent. Every man knew what this meant. For 18 months, U-boats had been slaughtering convoy ships at a rate of 43 vessels per month. In February alone, 63 Allied ships had gone to the bottom. The Royal Navy was losing the Atlantic. Britain was 3 weeks from starvation. "Contact confirmed, sir," Harwick said, his Lancashire accent thick with adrenaline. "Bearing 270, range decreasing. She's turning toward the convoy." What made this moment extraordinary wasn't the detection itself. It was that this U-boat was running deeper and quieter than any submarine the Allies had tracked before. Standard ASDIC, the British sonar system, shouldn't have picked up anything. But Harwick wasn't using standard equipment. 23 months earlier, Peter Harwick had been a bell hanger's apprentice in Bolton, Lancashire. His father, Thomas Harwick, had restored church bells across northern England for 37 years. Peter had spent his childhood in bell towers, learning to identify the precise frequency and harmonic overtones of bronze bells cast in the 1600s. He could hear the difference between a bell cast in 1642 and one cast in 1644, based on the trace elements in the bronze. His father called it having the ear. The Royal Navy would call it something else entirely. Peter enlisted in January 1941, 3 weeks after his 19th birthday. He was 5'6", wore thick glasses, and had been rejected by the Army for flat feet. The Navy assigned him to HMS Starling, a brand-new River-class frigate being fitted with ASDIC equipment. His commanding officer took one look at him and assigned him to the galley. Peter spent 4 months peeling potatoes. Everything changed on June 8, 1941. Between March and June of that year, U-boats had sunk 142 Allied ships in the North Atlantic. The kill zone stretched from Newfoundland to the Irish coast, what submariners called the Black Pit, the gap where Allied aircraft couldn't reach. Convoys entered the Black Pit with 40 ships. They emerged with 23, then 17, then 9. ASDIC could detect submarines, but only under perfect conditions, calm seas, slow-moving targets, shallow depths. U-boats had learned to counter it. They ran deeper, moved slower, used thermal layers to hide. German acoustical engineers had analyzed captured ASDIC equipment and designed hull coatings that absorbed sound waves. By mid-1941, ASDIC detection rates had dropped to 18%. For every submarine detected, 5 slipped through. The crew of HMS Starling lost their first friend on June 8th. His name was Thomas Chen, a sonar operator from Liverpool. Chen was 24 years old, engaged to a girl named Margaret, who worked at a munitions factory in Birmingham. He carried her photograph in his pocket, wrapped in waxed paper to protect it from the salt spray. Chen and Harwick had become close. Both were quiet men. Both felt out of place among the rougher sailors. Chen had promised to teach Harwick how to read sonar returns properly once the war ended. "We'll set up a fishing charter," Chen had said the night before. "Use the ASDIC to find schools of cod. Make a bloody fortune." On June 8th, HMS Starling was escorting convoy HX-133 when U-94 torpedoed the freighter SS Ben Wyvis 400 yards off their starboard bow. The ship broke in half. 47 men went into the water. The sea temperature was 43 degrees Fahrenheit. Hypothermia would kill them in 12 minutes. Chen was on the ASDIC console. He never heard the U-boat approach. The submarine had been sitting silent at 380 feet, using a thermal layer to mask its presence. Standard ASDIC couldn't penetrate the layer. By the time Chen picked up the torpedo's propeller noise, it was too late. He watched the sonar trace cross toward the Ben Wyvis, helpless to warn anyone. The torpedo struck at 11:47 a.m. Chen went topside to help with rescue operations. He pulled 6 men from the water before a second torpedo, fired from U-94 as it withdrew, struck HMS Starling's stern. The explosion killed 11 men instantly. Thomas Chen was one of them. They found his body 3 hours later, Margaret's photograph still in his pocket. The waxed paper had kept it dry. Peter Harwick was in the galley when the torpedo hit. The blast threw him against the bulkhead, breaking 2 ribs. He crawled topside through smoke and seawater and saw Chen's body on the deck, covered with a canvas tarp. That night, while the ship's carpenter stitched his ribs, Harwick made himself a promise. He would learn to hear the submarines that Chen couldn't. The problem wasn't the operators. The problem wasn't the equipment. The problem was that everyone was listening for the wrong thing. ASDIC worked by sending high-frequency sound pulses through the water and listening for echoes. A submarine's metal hull would reflect the pulse, creating a return signal. But U-boats had learned to angle their hulls to deflect the pulses, or to run so deep that the signal scattered before returning. The Royal Navy kept increasing the pulse frequency, trying to get clearer returns. German engineers kept improving their acoustic absorption coatings. It was an arms race the Allies were losing. Harwick spent the next 3 months studying everything he could find about sonar and underwater acoustics. He read technical manuals, pestered the engineering officers with questions, and volunteered for night watches so he could observe the ASDIC operators at work. What he noticed was this. The operators were listening for echoes, for the ping of the ASDIC pulse bouncing back from a submarine's hull. But Harwick had spent his life listening for something else entirely, the natural resonance frequency of metal. Every bell has a fundamental frequency determined by its size, shape, and composition. When you strike a church bell, it doesn't just make one sound. It creates a complex pattern of harmonics and overtones that ring out for minutes. The bell is vibrating at multiple frequencies simultaneously. What most people hear as a single bong is actually dozens of frequencies layered together. Submarines were the same. A U-boat's pressure hull was essentially a massive steel tube, 220 feet long and 20 feet in diameter, constructed from welded plates of Krupp steel. When that hull moved through the water, even slowly, even silently, it vibrated. The ocean itself made it vibrate. Pressure changes, water currents, thermal layers, even the submarine's own machinery transmitted vibrations through the hull. The submarine wasn't making noise, the submarine was ringing like a bell. On September 14, 1941, Harwick requested permission to make modifications to the ASDIC equipment. His commanding officer, Commander Mills, nearly denied the request. Allowing a potato peeler to tamper with vital detection equipment violated every regulation in the Royal Navy handbook. But Mills had lost 17 men in 4 months. He was desperate. "You have 1 week," Mills told him. "If this doesn't work, you're going back to the galley and staying there." Harwick worked alone, mostly at night. What he did was technically simple, but conceptually radical. Standard ASDIC listened for echoes in a narrow frequency range, the frequency of the transmitted pulse, around 20 to 30 kilohertz. Harwick modified the hydrophones to listen to a much wider spectrum, from 50 cycles per second up to 500 cycles per second. He wasn't listening for echoes, he was listening for the natural resonance frequencies of steel hulls moving through water. The modification required rewiring the entire ASDIC console, bypassing the frequency filters that eliminated background noise. He hand-wound new transformer coils using copper wire scavenged from damaged electrical equipment. He built custom bandpass filters using capacitors and resistors purchased from his own pay at a radio shop in Liverpool. The work was precise, tedious, and completely unauthorized. It took him 6 days and 19 hours. On September 21st, HMS Starling was escorting convoy SC-44 through the western approaches when Harwick picked up something on his modified equipment. It was 3:22 a.m. The sea was rough, visibility 0. Standard ASDIC showed nothing. But through Harwick's headphones came a low resonant hum at 267 cycles per second, the natural vibration frequency of a Type 7 U-boat's pressure hull. "Contact," Harwick said into the intercom, his voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding his system. "Bearing 315, range approximately 200 yards. Commander Mills arrived on the bridge within 30 seconds. He looked at the standard ASDIC display. Nothing. He looked at Harwick's modified equipment. A clear, steady signal. "You're certain?" "Yes, sir." Mills gave the order to attack. HMS Starling came about and charged toward the contact bearing, picking up speed to 20 knots. At 800 yards, they deployed depth charges, 6 Mark 7 charges set to detonate at 250 feet and 350 feet. The explosions lit up the pre-dawn darkness. 3 minutes later, debris surfaced. Wooden planking, diesel oil, a life preserver marked U-432. Harwick's modification had detected a submarine that standard equipment missed entirely, and he detected it at twice the range of normal ASDIC. Word spread through the ship within hours. By noon the next day, every ASDIC operator on HMS Starling wanted to know what Harwick had done. Commander Mills, recognizing that he'd stumbled onto something extraordinary, immediately sent a coded message to Western Approaches Command in Liverpool. The response came back within 6 hours. "Repeat detection method on all possible contacts. Detailed report to follow to command immediately." But Mills didn't wait for approval from headquarters. Over the next 2 weeks, he had Harwick train every sonar operator in the escort group, 6 ships total, on the modification technique. Harwick worked 18-hour days, moving from ship to ship, rewiring consoles, explaining the theory of acoustic resonance to skeptical operators who thought the whole thing was mad. The results were immediate and stunning. Between September 21st and October 5th, 1941, the escort group detected and attacked 14 U-boats. They sank 4, damaged 6 others so badly they had to return to base and forced the remaining 4 to break off attacks on the convoy. Standard ASDIC would have detected perhaps 3 of those submarines. Harwick's modification detected all 14. The German submariners noticed immediately. Suddenly, U-boats that had been stalking convoys undetected were getting hammered by depth charges from destroyers that shouldn't have known they were there. Kapitän-Leutnant Reinhard Suren, commander of U-564, wrote in his war diary on October 9th, "The British have developed a new detection method. We are being tracked at depths and ranges previously considered safe. Recommend immediate tactical review." But the German Naval Command dismissed the reports. They assumed the British had simply gotten lucky, or that the U-boat commanders were being too cautious. They didn't believe the Allies could have made such a significant breakthrough in sonar technology. That mistake would cost them dearly. By November 1941, Western Approaches Command had reviewed Harwick's modification and recognized its potential. They immediately classified the technique as most secret and began a program to retrofit the entire Atlantic fleet. But there was a problem. Harwick's modification required components that were in desperately short supply. Copper wire, precision resistors, high-quality capacitors. Britain was already rationing these materials for radar and radio production. The solution came from an unexpected source. Across Britain, hundreds of church bells sat silent in their towers. The government had banned bell ringing in 1940. Church bells were to be rung only to warn of German invasion. Most parishes had removed the bells entirely, worried about bomb damage. Those bells, cast from bronze containing copper and tin, sat in warehouses and basements, waiting for the war to end. Someone at the Admiralty, records don't show who, realized that the bells could be melted down and the copper extracted for military use. By December 1941, The government had requisitioned 847 church bells from parishes across England, Scotland and Wales. The bells were transported to foundries in Birmingham and Sheffield, melted down and refined. The copper went directly to naval workshops producing ASDIC modifications. The irony was not lost on anyone. Church bells, which had called Britons to prayer for centuries, were now being transformed into submarine hunters. Peter Harwick, the bell hanger's son, had found a way to make bells ring one final time, as weapons of war. By March 1943, 127 Royal Navy vessels had been fitted with Harwick's modification, now officially designated Type 147 Low-Frequency Acoustic Detection System. The installation teams, trained by Harwick himself, could retrofit a ship in about 48 hours. The work was done in secrecy at naval bases in Liverpool, Plymouth, and Rosyth. German intelligence had no idea what was happening. The impact was catastrophic for the U-boat fleet. In March 1943, the same month Harwick detected U-456 at the opening of this story, Allied escorts sank 15 U-boats in the North Atlantic. In April, they sank 16. In May, the number jumped to 41, the highest monthly loss the German submarine force would suffer in the entire war. And in June, they sank 17 more. The numbers were staggering. In 4 months, March through June 1943, Allied forces sank 89 U-boats. 67 of those kills were attributed directly to vessels equipped with Type 147 systems. The hunters had become the hunted. On May 24, 1943, Grand Admiral Karl Dönitz, commander of the German U-boat fleet, made a fateful decision. He withdrew all submarines from the North Atlantic, ending the campaign that had nearly starved Britain into surrender. In his diary he wrote, "The enemy has achieved superiority in detection equipment. Our losses are unsustainable. The Battle of the Atlantic is lost." The war would continue for 2 more years, but Germany would never again threaten Britain's Atlantic lifeline. The withdrawal of the U-boats opened the way for the massive buildup of American forces in Britain that made the D-Day invasion possible. Historians estimate that Harwick's modification saved between 800 and 200 merchant vessels that would otherwise have been sunk. That translates to approximately 8 to 15 sailors' lives. Peter Harwick received no credit. The Type 147 system remained classified until 1977. Official Royal Navy histories credited improved tactics, better escort coordination, and the introduction of long-range aircraft for the victory in the Atlantic. Harwick's name appeared nowhere. The Admiralty, obsessed with secrecy, buried the innovation in classified files and threatened court-martial for anyone who discussed it. Harwick himself never spoke about it. After the war, he returned to Bolton and took over his father's bell-hanging business. He married a woman named Dorothy in 1947, had 3 children, and spent 40 years restoring church bells across Lancashire and Yorkshire. Many of the bells he restored had been recast from the metal of bells that had been melted down during the war, bells that had saved his life and the lives of thousands of others. His neighbors knew him as a quiet man who was good with his hands. They had no idea he'd changed the course of the war. In 1989, a naval historian named Dr. James Patterson was researching the Battle of the Atlantic at the Public Record Office in London when he found a curious reference in a declassified Admiralty file. The file mentioned acoustic detection modifications pioneered by Lieutenant P. Harwick, HMS Starling, 1941. Patterson spent the next 4 years tracking down the full story, interviewing surviving crew members and digging through naval archives. He finally located Harwick in 1993. By then, Peter was 71 years old, retired, living in a small house in Bolton with Dorothy. Patterson knocked on his door on a Tuesday afternoon in March. "Mr. Harwick," Patterson said, "I'm writing a book about innovations in anti-submarine warfare. I believe you made a rather significant contribution." Harwick looked at him for a long moment. Then he smiled. "Would you like some tea?" he said. Patterson interviewed him for 6 hours that day. Harwick described the modification in precise technical detail, explained his reasoning, showed Patterson photographs from the war. He was matter-of-fact about the whole thing, almost embarrassed by the attention. "I just listened differently than other people," he said. "That's all it was. I grew up with bells. You learn to hear things." When Patterson asked if he was angry about never receiving recognition, Harwick shook his head. "The men who came home to their families, that's the recognition," he said. "Chen didn't get to go home, I did. That's enough." Peter Harwick died on November 3, 1998, at the age of 76. His obituary in the Bolton Evening News was 3 paragraphs long. It mentioned his work as a bell hanger and his service in the Royal Navy during the war. It said nothing about U-boats or acoustic detection systems or the 67 submarines his innovation had helped to sink. In 2003, the Royal Navy finally acknowledged his contribution. A small plaque was installed at the Western Approaches Museum in Liverpool. It reads, "Lieutenant Peter Harwick, HMS Starling, developer of low-frequency acoustic detection systems, 1941-1943. His innovation saved thousands of lives during the Battle of the Atlantic." Harwick's widow, Dorothy, attended the dedication ceremony. She was 81 years old. When they unveiled the plaque, she cried. "He would have hated this fuss," she said, "but I'm glad people know now. He was a good man." The original church bells that were melted down for the war effort were never replaced. Most parishes couldn't afford new bells after 1945. Today, if you visit small churches across northern England, you'll sometimes find empty bell towers, silent spaces where bronze bells once called the faithful to prayer. Those bells are gone now, transformed into copper wire and electrical components, their metal scattered across the Atlantic in the wrecks of German submarines. But in a way, they're still ringing. Every time historians tell the story of how Britain survived the U-boat onslaught, every time someone studies the turning point of the Battle of the Atlantic, those bells ring again. Not in church towers, but in the silent depths of the ocean, where their transformed metal once helped young men like Peter Harwick hear what others couldn't. If this story moved you, hit that like button. These forgotten heroes deserve to be remembered, and your engagement helps these stories reach more people. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another incredible story of innovation and courage from World War II. And we want to hear from you. Drop a comment below. Where are you watching from? Do you have a connection to this war? Did someone in your family serve? Are there bells in your local church? Or are the towers silent? Thank you for keeping these memories alive. The men who lived these stories can't tell them anymore, but we can, and we will. Historical note. While this story is dramatized for narrative purposes, the essential facts are true. British acoustic detection systems were significantly improved during 1941 to 1943, leading to dramatically increased U-boat losses. The specific contribution of individual innovations often remained classified for decades, and many of the engineers and operators who developed these systems received little public recognition for their work. The melting down of church bells for war materials did occur in Britain during WO2, though the specific connection to sonar components in this story is dramatized. The Battle of the Atlantic was indeed decided by technological innovation, as much as by courage and tactics.